Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the show that unpacks fascinating sources to, really pull out the key nuggets of knowledge for you.
And today, we've got a really interesting one. A groundbreaking study, actually the first of its kind, looking into microplastic contamination.
Right, specifically in beverages sold in France. We're talking water, soda, beer, wine, the things many of us drink every day.
Exactly. And it's not just confirming that, yes, microplastics are there, which we kind of suspected. This study points to a source that is, well, completely unexpected.
It really challenges what we thought we knew, so get ready, because after this deep dive, you might find yourself looking at your drink containers quite differently.
Definitely. We'll explore what microplastics actually are, reveal some pretty surprising contamination levels, and, importantly, uncover that unexpected source.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Microplastics. What are we actually talking about here?
Right. So basically, they're tiny plastic particles, defined as smaller than 5 millimeters across, often, completely invisible to the naked eye.
5 millimeters.
Yeah.
So pretty small. And why are they suddenly such a big topic?
Well, it ties back to the sheer amount of plastic we produce. It's exploded. Think about it. Back in the 1950s, global production was maybe 1.5 million tons a year.
Okay.
By 2022, it hit 400.3 million tons. That's a massive, massive increase.
Wow. That's an almost unimaginable number, and all that plastic has to go somewhere.
Precisely. And these tiny fragments, the microplastics, they're now found literally everywhere, in every ecosystem, from like the Mariana Trench to Mount Everest.
And crucially, inside us.
Yes, they've been detected in human bodies. And a major way we're exposed is through what we eat and, importantly for today's discussion, what we drink.
Which brings us to this French study. You said it was filling a specific gap.
Yeah, nobody had really done a comprehensive look at microplastic levels across a whole range of common beverages specifically sold in France before this.
So they looked at water, sodas, beer, wine.
Right. But they also wanted to see if the packaging played a role. Does it matter if your drink comes in plastic, glass, a carton, a can, or even one of those big wine cubitainers?
That's a key question. And I imagine when you're hunting for something microscopic, you have to be incredibly careful not to contaminate your own samples.
Oh, absolutely. Their methods were extremely rigorous. They worked inside a laminar flow cabinet. It's like an ultra-clean workspace to prevent airborne particles from falling in. All their glassware was baked at really high temperatures, 450 Celsius for hours, to destroy any potential contaminants. They filtered all their liquids meticulously. And they used controls, like they'd add a known amount of microplastics to some samples just to check how well their detection method was working. They got an 85.5% recovery rate, which is really good. It shows their approach was solid.
That level of care gives you confidence in the results. So what kind of drinks did they actually grab off the shelves?
It was a pretty wide selection, all bought back in June 2023 from local stores. They got mineral and spring waters, still and sparkling, in plastic, glass, and even brick cartons for soft drinks. Colas, both regular and diet teas. Lemonades in plastic, glass, and cans. Then various beers in glass bottles and cans. And wines, red, white, rosé, sparkling white in plastic, glass, brick, and those cubitainer bag-and-box things.
So a real cross-section of what people might buy. And what were they looking for in the particles they found? Size, shape.
Exactly. They categorized particles by size, focusing on the range from 30 up to 500 micrometers. For context, a human hair is about 70 micrometers thick, so we're talking tiny. They didn't find anything bigger than 500 micrometers.
Invisible specks, basically.
Pretty much. They also noted the shape. Was it a fragment, like a little shard, or a fiber? And they identified the type of plastic polymer, like polyester, which you find in clothes and bottles, or polyolefins, like polyethylene used in packaging films and bottles.
Okay, the moment of truth. What were the results? How much microplastic did they actually find?
Well, the levels varied quite a bit depending on the drink type. It was quite heterogeneous, as scientists would say.
Meaning all over the place.
Yeah. Waters had the lowest average, around 2.9 microplastics per liter. Let's call them MPs per liter.
Okay, 2.9 MPSL for water. What about sodas?
Higher. Colas averaged about 31.4 MPSL, teas were around 28.5, and lemonades were up at 45.2 MPSL.
So significantly more than water. And beer.
Beer was the highest overall average. Get this, 82.9 MPs per liter.
Whoa, 83. That's quite a jump. What about wine?
Wine was actually on the lower end, averaging about 8.2 MPSL, a bit higher than water, but much lower than beer or the soft drinks.
Interesting range. But you mentioned the really surprising part was about the containers, right?
Yes, this is the finding that really turns assumptions on their head. For almost every drink they tested, glass bottles had the most microplastic contamination.
Wait, glass, not plastic.
Nope, glass.
That seems completely counterintuitive. I always thought glass was, cleaner, more inert.
That's what most people would think. But look at the numbers. For water, glass bottles had 4.5 MTSL compared to just 1.6 MPSL in plastic bottles.
More than double.
And mineral water generally had more than spring water too, which is another detail. But then look at colas. Plastic bottles had about 2.1 MPSL, cans had 3.4,
How low?
but glass bottles, a staggering 103.4 MPSL on average.
103.
Yeah.
That's a massive difference.
It is. And weirdly, colas without sweeteners had even higher levels than the ones of sweeteners. We don't really know why that is yet.
Huh. And did this glass trend hold for teas and lemonades too?
It did. Tea in glass, 86.3 MPSL, lemonade in glass, 111.6 MPSL, both way higher than in plastic or cans for the same types of drinks.
And beer, you said beer was high overall.
Right. And within beer, the small glass bottles were the most contaminated, averaging 133.7 MPSL, significantly more than larger glass bottles or cans.
Okay, so glass seems to be the common factor for higher contamination in most cases, but you said wine was different.
Yeah, wine was the exception to the glass rule. For wine, the brick cartons actually had the highest average at 30.0 MPSL. Glass was next, then the cubitainers.
Interesting.
And even within wine, there were differences. White wine tended to have the highest levels, rosé the lowest. So lots of variables.
And the type of plastic found? Was it mostly fragments? What were they made of?
Fragments were definitely dominant, over 90% in most drinks. Wine had a bit more fibers, but still mostly fragments, around 73%.
And the material.
Polyester was found quite a bit, especially in those highly contaminated glass containers for teas, lemonades, colas, and beers. Polyolefins were present in all container types, but again, levels were often higher in glass bottles too.
So we have this consistent finding. More microplastics, often polyester fragments, in glass bottles. If it's not the glass itself, where are they coming from? This is the mystery part.
Exactly. And the researchers zeroed in on a key clue. They noticed that most of the microplastics they pulled out of the glass bottles, their color and chemical makeup, that polyester signature, perfectly matched the paint used on the outside of the metal bottle caps.
The caps. Not the glass bottle, but the painted metal lid.
Precisely. The little crown caps or twist-offs.
That's, wow. Okay, so did they test that theory?
They did. They ran specific experiments. They took brand new, clean glass bottles and brand new caps. When they just screwed on the caps as they came, uncleaned, boom, really high contamination, 287.3 MPSL.
Just from sealing the bottle once.
Yep. Then they tried just blowing the dust off the caps with compressed air before sealing. That cut the contamination down significantly to about 105.8 MPSL.
Still high, but much better.
Right. Then they tried blowing the caps and rinsing them with clean water before sealing. That brought it down even further to 86.7 MPSL.
Okay, so rinsing helps.
And get this, they analyzed the rinse water itself. On average, they found about 48 tiny yellow particles rinsed off each cap. It was clear proof that the particles were coming from the caps.
So the idea is these caps are stored in big bins, they rub against each other, the paint flakes off.
Exactly. Abrasion, friction. It creates tiny scratches and releases these paint particles, which are essentially microplastics, mostly polyester in this case. And they just sit there on the cap, waiting to fall into the drink when the bottle is sealed or maybe even when it's opened.
That makes so much sense. But it's probably not something anyone ever thought about.
Probably not. And it's not just the plastic particle itself. There's also the question of what additives might be in that paint, pigments, binders, other chemicals that could also be getting into the beverage.
That adds another layer of concern. So this study gives us this really specific insight. But stepping back, how does this fit into the bigger picture? Is it easy to compare microplastic studies from different parts of the world?
That's actually a huge challenge in this field. There's a real lack of standardized methods globally.
Oh, so?
Well, different studies look for different size ranges of particles. Some analyze small samples, others analyze large ones. Even the temperature used to dry samples can affect the results, potentially degrading some plastics like polyester fibers, making it seem like there are fewer than there really are.
So it's like comparing apples and oranges sometimes.
Pretty much. It makes it really hard to get a clear global picture or directly compare contamination levels reported in, say, Italy versus Canada versus France.
So does this French study help move things forward in terms of methodology?
I think it does. They were quite thorough. For instance, they analyzed 6 samples for each type of drink and packaging, whereas many studies only use 3. That gives you a more reliable average.
More data points.
Right, and they analyzed the entire contents of the bottle or container, not just a small subsample. That's important because microplastics might not be evenly distributed in the liquid, so their approach was quite robust, which adds weight to their findings, especially the cap connection.
That's good to hear. Is anyone working on creating those standardized methods you mentioned?
There is some movement. The European Commission, for example, just brought in a regulation in March 2024 with methods for measuring microplastics, but it's specifically for unbottled drinking water, like tap water.
Okay, so a start, but limited.
Exactly. It's a positive step towards standardization, defining how to sample, identify particles, check their composition, but it doesn't cover bottled water or sodas or beer or wine yet. So there's still a way to go to get everyone on the same page for all beverages.
Okay, let's bring this all together. For you, the listener, what are the absolute key takeaways from this deep dive?
I think there are 3 main things. First, microplastics are definitely present in a wide range of beverages sold in France, and the amounts can vary quite a lot.
Right.
Second, the big surprise. Glass bottles, counterintuitively, often showed higher contamination levels than plastic or cans for many drinks.
And third,
The likely culprit for that higher contamination in glass isn't the glass itself, but tiny paint particles flaking off the metal caps, especially polyester-based paint. And simple pre-cleaning of those caps can make a big difference.
so knowing this, how should we think about our choices? Does this mean we should avoid glass bottles?
Well, it gives you more information to consider about packaging. But, and this is really important, the study itself is very clear on this point. Currently, there isn't enough toxicological data to say whether consuming beverages with these levels of microplastics poses a health risk or not.
So we know they're there, we know where they're likely coming from in many cases, but we don't know the health implications yet.
Exactly. The science on the health effects of ingested microplastics is still developing. So this study identifies a source and presence, but it doesn't and can't yet tell us about risk. It's knowledge, but not a definitive health warning at this stage.
Which leaves us with a really interesting thought to ponder. Now that we know this, especially about the caps, what responsibility might consumers feel they have, or perhaps more pointedly, what could or should manufacturers do about this easily identifiable source of contamination? It shifts the question a bit, doesn't it? From just what's in your drink to how did it get there, and could something simple be done to prevent it?